Hey guys, thanks for joining us at the Backstage Pass for members with Rachael Carman, and we're just going to carry on with what we were talking about. Rachael was just sharing just the importance of marriage and really God's design for marriage, and so we're gonna get into some practical tips, which I love the nitty gritty practical because it all sounds beautiful, but I want to know how to do this nuts and bolts at home. And we were talking about date nights and how important date nights were, and I remember I had an older, wiser mom who had 6 kids, and she would constantly tell us, her husband was a doctor, so she would constantly be telling us how important date nights were. And I thought, that's probably easy because your husband's a doctor. Like, of course you can just get a babysitter and go out to a fancy dinner. And it just really felt, it was the best advice, but it didn't feel practical for me. And so we're going to share some of the practical tips because I cannot possibly be alone in the fact that date nights are important, but I know that as homeschool moms, we're already sacrificing. Most often we're sacrificing an income. So that just feels like an extra we can't do. And for my husband and I, we figured out early on that we can bring date nights home. Our kids aren't on screens a lot. So we would let them get a movie that they wouldn't normally get. And we'd put them in a back room on the laptop. And we had 2 hours. It was a miracle. And he would pick up dinner on his way home from work. And it was an amazing date night. And that's not all the time because sometimes we do need to get up and go out. But there are practical ways. So when we say go on a date night, don't chalk it up to I just can't do that because it is important. And there's a reason that these women that have been married 33 years, my parents 50, I mean, wow. There's a reason they suggest date nights because it's important. So Rachael, what are some other practical things to make this date night thing happen?
Yeah, no, I'm gonna springboard off what you just said first. So back in the day, for Valentine's Day, right? Mm-hmm. There were several years where me and the kids would work feverishly all day long to put together a Valentine dinner, which classically was Italian at our house. I don't know if that's true. And the kids would serve us, like they would put on little aprons and little bow ties and come in, you know, clumsily and clang everything around. But it was glorious, right? Because we would light candles. And then when they got older, we would have a Valentine's dinner, all of us together, and like everybody got dressed up. I want my kids to know how to eat with fine china, and I want them to know candlelight. I don't want my daughters to be swooned the first time a guy sits across from her in candlelight. So he's been doing it since she was 5. He's going to have to work harder than that. Another way that we did it, so when we were young in our marriage, our first 2 sons were born in Akron, Ohio, and there were 5 stay-at-home moms in the block. And none of us could afford babysitting, right? Because we were all single income. We didn't have any money. Yeah. So we printed money. No, seriously. We printed something called, we called them baby bucks. And everybody got 4 to begin with. And 1 baby buck got you 1 kid for 1 hour. Wow. And so then we would just trade off. And the reason we got there was we were in a Bible study together. We were reading an Elizabeth George book, I believe. And we became convicted that we were all neglecting our husbands. That we could scrape together money to buy a new petunia for the front yard because we all loved to garden. But why couldn't we make time to go out with our husbands? Right. And so it was a really good example of the power of accountability and making that a priority. And then when our kids were older, we would get a babysitter, and it would be a really big deal, right? We'd get a babysitter. But when my oldest son turned, I think it was 13, his gift to us on our anniversary was he wanted to watch his siblings, which I just feel like, you know, that's just a home run. He was so excited. Now, I was nervous because he was 13, but my youngest was 6 months old.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
So, I mean, he had been with Benjamin, right? So, I mean, it wasn't like they didn't know each other. They were together all day long. But even then, I just remember it was the fastest date in history, right? Because I'm thinking, I can't leave him long, you know? And I really wasn't afraid that he was going to hurt him. It was just that mother thing, right?
Oh, sure.
So I think we were gone for an hour. I mean, but it was glorious. But here's the kicker. Guess what we paid our sons to watch the siblings?
What?
We paid them in Chick-fil-A brownies.
Which is more valuable than money at that age, probably.
Right? And so what was really
So
cool,
funny.
we kind of learned that because when we would get babysitters for 7 kids or 6 kids or 5 kids, I mean, along the road, we were blessed to be in a homeschool community. And so we literally got what? Girls who were in big families and were homeschooling, because it didn't intimidate them to have 5 or 6 kids running around, because they were one of 5 or 6 or 10 kids running around. But what those mothers told me was, okay, so you can't pay her what you would pay someone else, because we believe that pay her, but we want to talk to you about that, because we want her to know that this is a service that she's doing to you, that this is part of her gift to you and her act of service to you. And so I think, again, what a beautiful thing, because then my girls grow up, right? And then they pay it forward to other homeschooling families, because they're not intimidated by 5, 6, 10, or 12, right? So that's one thing. Do the date night. Another one that I really, really love, just practically, is write notes to each other. Davis, it was just so dear. So we kind of schooled all over the house. I romanticized having the schoolroom, and I don't know if either of you were guilty of that, but we actually were fortunate to have a space designated as the schoolroom. But for those of you who think that that's the answer, just let you know. We were all over the house. It never worked that way. My Pollyanna vision of us being in there just didn't, I don't know why, but anyway. But Davis has worked from the house now for almost 13 years, and he would scribble something on a Post-it, and one of the kids would walk by and he would go, "Can you go take this to Mom?" And so then they're part of this little romantic thing back and forth. Or sometimes before he would go to work, he might leave a note for me on the microwave that all the kids could see. And so they're seeing us, or I would give him a note, or I would call him, or I found something something that seems tiny but was huge, is I would make something for dinner, like maybe a special loaf of bread or a special side dish, or maybe the main course, or maybe a drink, like Davis loves vanilla lattes. And I would make a big deal out of, let's make this for Daddy. And so the kids are a part of that too, right? Another thing I think is really sweet that kids need to see is they need to see you chase each other around the house.
We love grossing out our kids. It's one of our favorite things to do.
Isn't it just the best? Isn't it just
so fun? You hug or kiss and they're like, ew, stop. And they're still looking from the side of their eyes.
It gives them security. It gives them a security.
It really does.
Flirting with each other is one of the greatest things.
I always say, your dad is so hot. And they're like, that is so weird. I'm like, he is. You just wait. Someday you're going to see it. Your dad is so hot.
Right. That's so true. I refer to Davis as my big, handsome, sexy stud. And all the kids know that, right? And they ought to know that. I mean, it's not inappropriate.
No.
We hold hands on the sofa when we have pizza and movie night. The kids know we're going to sit together. It's not even a question of whether or not Mom and Dad will sit together.
I love that you say that, because I got advice from when we were newly parents. I remember a woman said, we never let our kids sit. And I'm not saying right or wrong, but this was just good advice for us. We never let our kids sit between us in church. It was always Mom and Dad together and then the children. And it just, those quiet things establish, they establish that unity. And I will always remember my dad. I mean, they're just establishing that we're spouses first. We're husband and wife. We're one. And you treat us as one. And I remember my dad always did that. And he referred to my mom a lot, not as your mom or your mother. He would call her my wife a lot. I just remember my dad would always say my wife. And I loved that. It just set that, I don't know, that setting in our home that's his wife before his bride before she's my mom, you know?
Yeah.
And he'd always say, no one talks to my wife that way. When we would sass talk her, I loved that.
Oh, that's really, really good.
Yeah. So I love all these practical tips. They're amazing. And I think I would say primarily women are listening to this. So ladies, don't wait for your husband to do it. Don't sit around. I see too many women wait. Well, see, you should write me notes and you should take me on date nights. And then they get bitter, but do it. Set the precedent, you know, I just love God's word says, be the wife of his youth. You know, you did that when you were young. And so be the wife of his youth and watch that he's going to start to open back up. If you guys are struggling, he's going to open back up, and you're going to find that it becomes easier for him. And you are going to find that those things are met on his end when you start meeting them on yours.
And do it from a genuine heart of service, not with the intention of getting something in return.
Absolutely.
You know, don't expect him to reciprocate.
Yeah.
You know, well, I did this for you, so you must do this now for me, because then that's just going to end in disappointment. And so when we do it, you know, from a true, pure heart, that is really service to our husbands, and in turn, service to the Lord, and respecting the unity that he has brought together for us and for our husbands. And so I think oftentimes as wives, we do things like that and we expect our husbands to reciprocate, you know, or I remember early in our marriage, you know, I would do things or plan things. And I always like had these ideas of what I wanted Garrett to do. I wanted him to plan this. I had this one fantasy that he was going to go out and buy me a beautiful dress. I don't know if I saw this in a movie somewhere, or I have no idea where this came from, but he was going to go to the store and buy me a beautiful dress. And he was going to come home and he was going to give it to me and say, we're going to go out on this fabulous date and take me to this really nice place. I don't even know where the place was going to be. But it was going to be amazing. And he never did that. And I mean, I don't think I ever even told him. I just expected that he was going to know that that's what was in my mind. And so then I was always disappointed because he didn't live up to what my dream was. And that's ridiculous. And it really did cause disappointment and problems in our marriage because I had my ideas of what he should be. And then it resulted in disappointment. So I learned after many years that, you know, I need to, if I have an idea, just run with it. So we have literally like 4 minutes left. Rachel, can you run through maybe just a couple more practical tips for just having a successful, godly marriage?
So far, I have chase your husband around and refer to him as your hot, sexy man.
And date night. Really good. I mean, you start there, right? You're going up.
Let's see how many we can get in the next 4 minutes.
Another one that is just universally good. I think it's so good for our souls. And I love that you just brought up the issue of authenticity. Because, you know, our kids can smell fake at 50 paces. And they should never get a whiff of that in our marriage. One thing that I think is fundamental for a marriage working, which flies in the face of the theory that this is a 50-50 thing, is no 50-50 about this. I mean, it will fail. Because you know what that does is both of you are constantly tabulating and trying to make sure that, you know, the other person and taking you for a ride. It's not that. It's not that. It's 100% on both sides of the equation to make it work. But
I have to interject and say my parents just celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary this summer. And my every anniversary, my dad would say, whether you ask or not, we're going to give you our greatest marriage advice. And every year he told us the same thing. He said, it's not 50-50. He said, it's 99-1. And because you said it's 100. And he said, and that 1% is the other person's breathing. He said, as long as their 1% is their breathing, then I'm given 99%. And he always said that. And the other thing he always said is, it's not about you. Over and over we heard that. It's not about you. It's not about what they can do for you, or, you know, it's not about you. And so I love that you say, you know, it's not 50-50. That's a great lie. That is a lie. But it's 99-1. And as long as they're breathing, that's their 1%.
Right. 50-50 equals divorce.
Right.
Or misery.
But I gotta tell you, I think that was Tony Evans. I always strive to give credit because I don't want people to think that I'm brilliant. I'm not. I'm a compilation of all that
I disagree.
I think he was the one I heard talk one time about marriage, and he dared the couples to just try to outserve each other. And, you know, it's great to get a card or a note or a Post-it. It's great to get a flower. It's great to go on a date. But there is something so amazing about someone serving you, right? Actually noticing that you need something, anticipating you needing something, loving you enough to provide something that maybe you wouldn't even dare to ask or pursue because of time or money or whatever. And you know, that's what Jesus actually did on the cross. Paul writes, while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. He knew what we needed before we even knew what we needed.
That's right.
And he was the only one that could do that for us. Similarly, as the wife to our husbands, we know what he needs. We know what he wants. We know what he likes. And if we don't, we ought to learn those things. We ought to become a student of our husband and learn those things. And we ought to look for opportunities to serve them. Can I get you something else before I sit down? Can I get you something? Can I serve you? Would you like? I walk by his office. Could I get you some fresh water? You know, and because your kids are watching you. And you know, I have had a couple of surgical recoveries this year, and so my kids have seen my husband serve me in unique ways, right? You know, would you like another pack of frozen peas to put on your food? It seems like a nothing thing, right? Or he's had to drive me places that normally I would be able to go and I haven't been able to drive. Those are the beautiful things that our kids see. They see that commitment on that level of action. It's not just, I love you too. It's like, oh my goodness, did you see?
Showing the love.
We're showing them what it looks like to serve. And so that is a very practical thing that I think often gets neglected. It's just serving each other. And again, back to what you said, Abby, we need to do it first. Go first. Don't sit around and wait. It's easy to just be, that's the scripture that says, don't let a root of bitterness spring up, because that's how it springs up. It's when we're just sitting there like we can't do something ourselves. We need to go first.
Well, that is a fantastic way to close this out. I want to suggest 3 things really quickly. Rachel, you mentioned it in either part 1 or part 2. I'm not sure which one, but the book Love and Respect by, what's his name? Egrix. I forget the first name. Anyway, I will link to that. We actually have the video series and it's fantastic. So you can get the video series or the book. They're both great. And they actually have a podcast, the Love and Respect podcast. So that's a great resource. And then I don't typically recommend promote movies on the podcast, but even though we're filmmakers, but the 2 that I highly always recommend for people to watch, they're 2 of my 2 favorites actually, are War Room and Fireproof. And both are so well made and really, really great encouragement to parents, to husbands and wives, and just learning how you can serve the other person and what that can, I know they're movies, but they're just a great example of what God can do in a marriage, because it's real. And my favorite part, by the way, of Fireproof, I don't know if you guys know this, but in the very end, you know, he and his wife, they make amends with each other. They finally come back together. And at the very end of the movie, he kisses his wife, who's not his real wife. Chelsea is Kirk Cameron's real wife in real life. And he has another actress playing his wife in the movie. And at the very end of the movie, he kisses his wife. And that is his real wife, Chelsea, that he kisses. They show the back of him kissing her. And so he's so committed to never kissing another woman that even in the movie, they had his real wife stand in for the actress. And so he got to kiss his real wife at the end. I always thought that was so special. And I love that he's that committed to his marriage.
Absolutely.
So anyway, thank you, Rachel and Abby. You are such a blessing. I appreciate your time today. And thank you guys, Backstage Pass members, for watching. You are a blessing to us as well. I hope this has been a great encouragement to you. We will have show notes with all of these things linked in them. And again, you can go to rachelcarman.com, RACHAELCARMAN.com com and learn more about Rachael and her ministry. So thank you, ladies. Have a fantastic afternoon, and
thank you.
See you guys back
Go on
here
a
next
date.
time. Go on a date. Okay. Bye.
Bye.